Hi everybody, it's Miss Martinson. I'm going to go through your notes today with you. Before we get started, I want you to take a moment to think through a high and a low for your past day. So I'm going to share a high and a low. My high is that I got to bake cookies. Haven't done that in like a year. And then my low is probably that my fiance is staring at me while I'm recording this video. All right, right now you should be watching the video for notes, but you should also have opened your notes for today on Google Classroom. If you watched my how-to video, it should have shown you how to get to that. If you haven't right now, please go back to Google Classroom and find the assignment called Notes Environmental Changes. Your notes should look sort of like Cornell style notes. On the left-hand column, you'll see bolded words. Those are your key points. And then on the right, it's empty so that you can add in your notes. I would suggest later going back through and editing them by underlining or highlighting or adding colors. At the bottom of your notes, there is a third section called Summary, and that's where you're supposed to write in a couple of sentences what you took away from today's lesson. I'm going to start with this first slide. So on this slide, you're going to see a couple of different pictures of environments. We are talking about ecosystems and we are talking about ecology. We've been talking about abiotic and biotic factors before we went into spring break. An abiotic factor is anything that is not living. So in these pictures, the water would be considered an abiotic factor. And a biotic factor means that it is living or was once living. So in this picture with the birds and the crocodile, the plants would be considered biotic, the birds biotic, etc. When I look at these pictures, something I notice is that each one is composed of different abiotic and biotic factors, and they have different levels of biodiversity. Biodiversity is a very important concept. Bio means anything that's living, and diversity means like how many different things. For an environment to be biodiverse, it has a lot of different organisms, and it also has a lot of each organism. And the reason that matters is because the more biodiverse an ecosystem is, the more likely it can survive because it should be more sustainable. Sustainability is a way that we describe how long an ecosystem can survive. And in these pictures, I picked two ecosystems that would be considered pretty sustainable because there's a good amount of life in both of these pictures. The top picture is representing a rainforest and the bottom picture is representing a marine biome. And so the question we ask ourselves when we look at these pictures is, can that environment survive big changes? And those changes can be hunting, it can include extinction, it can include fires and climate changes and drought. So again, what's most important here is the question, how sustainable is the environment? How likely is it going to survive a change? An environment is composed of lots of different things, but we're really focused on the top section of this picture. It has the individual as one single organism. When we talk about changes, I want you to be thinking about populations instead of individuals. So will the population survive? What will happen to that population? And that population, it affects the community, which is composed of different populations. And then the ecosystem is different because it's composed of both the living and non-living things in the environment. When we talk about environmental changes, we're talking about anything that happens to our environment. And we know that environments will change no matter what. Things are not static on our planet. They're always changing, there's always evolution, there's adaptations. And some of these changes are going to be caused by men, and those are man-made changes, and some will be natural changes. It doesn't make one better than the other, although we tend to associate changes by man more negatively than those that are natural. In these two pictures, we see examples of controlled fire and deforestation. As scientists, we know the environment will change. It's not so much if it will change, we're more interested in how it will change and what that means for the populations of the environment. So we have been talking about plate tectonics before we went into this unit, and this picture should be familiar. And this is where it's going to feel like, was it Dora the Explorer video? I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about it. So what did we call this supercontinent? This continent was called Pangaea, and we used it to prove the concept of continental drift. So at one point, all these continents could fit together like a puzzle, and then they slowly over time separated. And it's key to us that it took a long time to separate, because the longer the change, the more likely my species will adapt. And so this leads to like kind of our guiding thought. We want to be thinking about how fast can a species evolve compared to how fast the environment is changing. So for continental drift, it's a really slow change, which means our species are going to be better able to adapt and survive. So we either have short-term or long-term changes. The short-term change is something that's going to take a little bit of time to occur. And we're thinking about the scheme of the Earth. And things that seem like they're fast to us are going to be ridiculously fast to the Earth. Things that are slow to us are still going to be ridiculously fast to the Earth. So anything that's less than 5 years is going to be considered a short-term change. So examples of when that happens, our organism will either die. So if there's like a very tragic event, like there's a landslide, my organism's not going to be able to escape and it's going to die. Or the organism's going to temporarily move out of that area. And this is like what we typically think of, if there's a fire, our organisms are going to try to get away from the fire. But some organisms are going to be more successful at leaving that area than others. Like a bird. A bird's going to be able to fly, so it's going to like zoom out of there no problem. Whereas like our little precious koala bears that are in Australia, they're probably not going to make it. And examples of this could include drought. So that top picture is kind of showing a drought area. It was a lake that used to be covered in water, and because it hasn't been getting enough rain, it's slowly been drying up. Or like the fires in the bottom picture. Other examples to think about. So El Nino is a change in weather that occurs. Normally, weather is going to be considered a short-term change. El Nino occurs every 3 to 7 years, and it's going to be a warmer weather pattern. The opposite of that is La Nina, and that's going to be cooler weather patterns. And that's kind of shown in this left picture. It's really trying to show the change in temperature and how that affects like the warm air rising, causing more evaporation, and typically you're going to have more violent storms. So El Nino is going to be a short-term change. Controlled burning is also going to be a short-term change. We use controlled burning to help prevent fires. I can control a burn. I can burn a small portion of prairie or a small portion of forest, and that can help actually let some other plants grow. Certain plants are adapted where they need fire in order for the seeds to really sprout. Long-term changes are gradual in the environment, and we are thinking longer than 5 years. Organisms might go through natural selection and become more adapted if there's a long-term change. Now, I want you to see that that word is might. It's not a guarantee. It's just that it could happen. It's more likely that our organism is going to survive and adapt. And I shouldn't be really using the word organism. I should be using words like population instead. An example of this would be global warming. On the right side, you'll see a picture. It's really using pollution as an example. So originally, in my top picture, I see a tree, and that tree is very light in color, and my bird is going to eat the moths that are on the tree. And the light colored moths are going to be able to survive because they're more camouflaged. And so we're going to have a light white colored moth. Over time, I see in the background that we've added some plants and they're releasing pollution to the air. That pollution is going to discolor my tree, so now my tree is really dark. All of a sudden, it's really easy for my bird to see the white moths, and so the white moths are going to start being eaten more often, and the dark moths are going to survive. So this illustration is to help remind you about how natural selection occurs over time. And organisms that have shorter reproductive cycles are going to be more successful at becoming adapted to their new environment. So an example would be like insects. Insects, they have a short time period between when they can have offspring, and it's going to develop a lot faster than, let's say, like an elephant. It's going to be really difficult for an elephant to survive a natural change because it's going to take a lot longer for the elephant to have a baby. Whereas our short-term populations, like short reproductive cycles for rabbits or insects or just things that live for a shorter amount of time, tend to have more babies. The more babies you have, the shorter the time between having babies, the more likely you will be adapted. So here are a couple of examples of long-term changes. At the bottom left, the volcanic eruption. When a volcano erupts, it's going to cause a couple of changes. It will change the landscape. We have magma rising to the surface. We're creating new soil. We can cause earthquakes. But there's also going to be a cloud of smoke, and that smoke is going to be typically toxic to the environment, and it's going to cause kind of a fallout area. If y'all know about nuclear fallout zones, it's similar to that. I have global warming up here as an example. It's this map in particular showing the change in temperature from 1951 to 1980 to now, and the red spots are showing an increase in temperature, like very, very, very high temperature. Global warming, if we change our oceans by 1 degree, that's going to cause a lot of bleaching of our coral reefs. And then we have air pollution, which kind of goes back to my previous example of the peppered moth. Certain animals are going to adapt to this air pollution because the environment is going to actually be covered with a layer of grime. But you can even see in this picture that visibility is altered when you have a lot of air pollution. Now that we've talked about our concepts and hopefully you've taken some notes, we're going to go into practice questions. So the first one, which of the following would most likely cause a population of organisms to become adapted over time? A wildfire, B, drought, C, global warming, Or D, seasonal change from summer to winter? Getting Dora Explorer, I'm going to give you a chance to think about it. All right, I feel like that was enough time. If you chose C, I don't know which one's C, global warming, you are correct. So global warming takes a lot of time, more than 5 years, which means my organism will have the ability to adapt. All right, question number 2. Rabbits are able to reproduce multiple times within a year. They are herbivores found in mostly grassland areas. Some breeds have been found to burrow underground. Which of the characteristics of the rabbit will allow it to adapt to an environmental change? A. Reproduce multiple times within a year. B. An herbivore diet. C. Live in grasslands. Or D. Burrow underground. And if you chose A, you are correct. The more we reproduce, the more likely we will adapt. Okay, question number 3. Which of the following would most likely be able to adapt and survive an environmental change? A. Bacteria found solely in hot springs. B. An insect with a short generation span. C. A bird that's able to migrate. Or D. A weasel with fur that changes colors with the seasons. All right, if you chose A, nope, that's wrong. If you chose B, you got the right answer. Fix that. Y'all, it's that time of year. It's that COVID time. Apologies. All right. I hope that was good practice for you. This will be posted in Google Classroom. And good luck. I miss you. I miss you a lot.